Modern AAA gaming is a disgrace. And that's me being generous, honestly, because most of the time, modern AAA gaming is a brain damaged, autistic, woke disgrace. And especially when it comes to evil companies like EA, Activision, Blizzard, BioWare, and the list goes on and on and on, honestly. At this point, it's hard to point at a AAA company that actually likes their players, that respects gamers, and well, you know what? I'm not even asking honestly for respect as a gamer from the companies that try to sell us things. I'm just asking for them to actively not hate us at this point because it honestly seems like the only thing they have towards us is absolute contempt. And that makes no sense because we are the reason they have money. Without gamers, no one's buying games. The Vogue crowd already showed its full force, and its full force wasn't even 20k players good enough. And they didn't buy anything else, also, okay? So, it's not happening. These companies should learn through either pleasantries or the whip, the stick without the carrot, that we are the ones who dictate who wins and who loses. And if these companies can't get with the message that we are their bosses, I don't think they deserve to survive at this point. I think they deserve to go the way of the Ubisoft.
There is something so validating hearing that your worst assumptions about AAA publishers is actually true. Like EA apparently referring
Always knew it.
to RPG players as cave dwelling nerds that'll show up for anything that they make. That's not a joke, by the way. That was their strategy. And with Dragon Age the Veilguard now, well, you cave dwelling nerds are bad people. They got a term for you now. You're an anti fan, scum of the earth. Just because you didn't want to.
By the way, I love the fact that these companies think, you know how we're gonna get these gamers that we call trash to now like us again? By offending them even more. Whoever designed this strategy is a genius, and he's probably actively working against the companies.
Show up for a game that didn't speak to you. What's really frustrating for me is that these guys are so close to the truth, but they just won't see it. Probably because they don't want to see it, but they see the fans walking away, they see the frustration, they see the complaints, they see the backlash, and instead of asking why,
and they ignore
it, they just write it off as hate or they write it off as toxicity. Like, players want games to fail just for the hell of it.
I want games to fail, okay? I have said this. There are people who think that that is a bad position to be in, but I think it's completely reasonable. I am a firm believer in reaping what you sow. And if these companies are trying for years, some companies even for decades at this point, to be bad against their consumers, against their core audience, against the people who were fans of them, I think these companies deserve to reap what they sow, and what they are supposed to reap at this point is a fat bankruptcy check. There's no check saying bankruptcy, but it's bankruptcy. Okay? That's what it is. That's what the companies deserve. And if that's what they deserve, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with BioWare closing its doors. Dragon Age Veilguard was a disaster? Well, let's put the idiots who made that piece of garbage on Mass Effect 5 and let's see how that turns out. It's probably gonna be so much better, right? Yeah, no one thinks that. No one thinks that. Everyone knows it's gonna be a disaster. These people are stupid and insane.
People are sick and tired of feeling like they are getting pushed out of a hobby that they love. They are sick and tired of being insulted for wanting a game to represent the name that's behind it. They keep wanting to act like it's the audience that's changed and not these games. EA is going through it right now. Dragon Age the Veilguard flopped catastrophically. Apex Legends is swirling the drain right now. They're having issues over there. They have had more.
To be fair, Apex Legends can go for 3 years at this point and still be fine. Even though, again, all the characters that they add are now literally non-binary and need a gender reveal party.
Layoffs, more game cancellations, yet we still have people that want to point the finger at the audience and say they are the problem here. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the industry's exhaustion with players that want to see games fail for absolutely no reason at all, apparently. Big changes going on at EA and what these companies really think of you. But before that, a word from today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by
Ooh, how about no?
Now, I think that most of us have always had a creeping suspicion about how AAA executives really view their audiences. We joke about it, we speculate, we'll spin up some of our own theories, but every so often, someone from the inside always says the quiet part out loud, and it's somehow way worse than you would have expected. In the ongoing crash out around Dragon Age the Veilguard, former BioWare lead writer David Gator gave an interview to Games Radar that offers us a rare glimpse into just how out of touch these companies actually are. In an article titled, this is so good, by the way, Dragon Age Maestro says EA spoke about a hypothetical nerd cave full of diehard RPG fans who would always show up so you didn't have to try to appeal to them. The article reads, a Dragon Age veteran says,
I mean, this used to work for a while, honestly. This opinion was right for, I don't know, the past... It kind of disappeared in the past 5 years, I would say, but this opinion was legit, actually. There were a thing called, Bethesda fanboys. There were Dragon Age fanboys, but nowadays it's like, they still exist, but most of them are gone. You can't fail something 5 times in a row and expect people to be like, oh, 6 times the charm! No, it doesn't work like that.
that EA liked to refer to a cave where RPG fans who could be trusted to buy anything that the genre threw at them would dwell. Speaking with Games Radar Plus, BioWare veteran David Gator explained that before he left BioWare, his taste had become somewhat old-fashioned in EA's eyes. I was very vocal on the Dragon Age team, he says. I was always trying to push for our traditional mechanics, and that wasn't very welcome in the EA sphere. He said that EA considered those mechanics, the kind that shaped Dragon Age Origins, to be slow and cumbersome rather than the actiony and slick presentation that the studio was being pushed toward. That meant that Gator's views were often...
Actiony and slick is just code words for boring and damaged spongy.
Not very welcome, despite his long tenure at the studio and work on many of its most famous RPGs. That was partly because he says EA didn't think that the traditional RPG audience was one worth focusing on. He claims that Overseers referred to the mechanics being pushed as in the cave. The cave, he explains, was where nerds went. The nerds were in the cave. You made an RPG, and the nerds in the cave would always show up for an RPG because it was an RPG. That devotion to their genre in EA's eyes meant that you didn't have to worry about the nerds. You didn't have to try to appeal to them. You had to worry about the people who weren't in the cave, which was the audience they actually wanted, which was much larger. Yeah, that didn't work out all that.
Yeah, this honestly makes sense now that they put it in words, because this was the thing, right? You could see it with Dragon Age Veilguard. I think it was pretty obvious if you actually thought about it. It was the fact that EA was like, yeah, the old people who made Dragon Age a success, they're gonna buy it anyway. So let's go for the modern 20k people strong audience. Let's see how that... And it's gone. And it's gone. It's dead.
Well for you, did it. It is hard to believe how arrogant this mindset is. The idea that your existing audience somehow doesn't matter, that they'll just show up no matter what and you don't need to appeal to them. This is so disrespectful and so backwards. No wonder players today are saying that AAA games are getting worse and developers aren't listening to them. It's quite literally their strategy. That is not how you grow. That is not how any successful industry treats its customers or thinks about its customers. Imagine if Mustangs became minivans, McDonald's sold tofu cubes instead of fries, or Disney World turned into an art museum. You're supposed to build outward from your base. Use the trust and consistency that you have earned to reach new players. That's how communities grow.
If Disneyland turned into an art museum, that would be one hell of a creepy art museum.
Oh, that's how momentum works. You don't scrap the foundation, you expand on it. But what EA is describing is the opposite. You're chasing customers that you don't have while you're pushing away the ones that you do, prioritizing this theoretical market over the real one that you've already built. And when that new crowd doesn't show up, you're going to be left with nothing because, well, the people that would have carried your game are already gone. That's the part that never adds up for me. Serving your audience and expanding it are not competing goals. They are the exact same goal. You serve the audience so that you can expand it. But I guess when you're chasing record profits every year, a loyal fan base just becomes a static point on a graph to these people. Suddenly everything starts to make sense here. I have been struggling to figure out why these companies act blindsided when their games flop. People are confused about Avowed, they're stunned by Assassin's Creed Shadows, shocked by Dragon Age the Veilguard, but from where I'm standing, and probably where
Was anyone really shocked by Dragon Age Veilguard? I don't know about that one.
anybody else is who didn't buy those games, the answer couldn't be any more clear. The core audience was not respected. The games or the studios changed. They didn't show.
To be honest about Dragon Age Veilguard, no audience was respected. One of the funniest things about Veilguard was how woke it was, but at the same time how it didn't even respect the woke audience, in the sense that, you got Tosh, the non-binary dragon, no one even knows what the fuck that creature is, right? And when it comes to Tosh, it's like, respect my pronouns! Respect my... And, that was kind of the deal in the game. That was the story about the pronouns. And yes, there's more story about the pronouns than there is actually about what's happening in the game. Irony, I know. And the thing is, you needed to respect his pronouns, otherwise things happen. But then there's another guy who is like, don't call me a necromancer or something like that. That's not respectful. And it's like the same deal as the pronouns. And the non-binary hissy fit that constantly is a pain because someone misgenders them and then, things happen, is like, I don't care what you want to call me. I'll fucking call you what you want. I think you're a necromancer. I'm gonna call you a necromancer. Like, what the fuck? Really? Really? We're gonna go through this whole thing about pronouns mattering and blah, 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 blah. Do a barb. And then there's a guy who says, oh, I don't like you using this word to describe me. And you're like, I don't give a F. Like, seriously? That's how you're gonna... You can't even be consistently woke. It's just mind-baffling, honestly, how bad that was. How stupid it was.
Up. Simple as that. That's the pattern. That's what nobody at the top seems willing to admit. And it blows my mind that these guys cannot see what is sitting right in front of them. Because in that same interview that they openly admit that they saw EA talking about nerds in a cave as a built-in audience that they didn't have to worry about, Gator then pivots to talking about anti-fans, people who root for games to fail well before they launch. In an article written by Steve Bonifield, a PC gamer, titled, "They are very determined suddenly to see your game fail," former Dragon Age writer calls out anti-fans who bet on games failing before launch. He writes, "We've seen it happen.
We don't bet on games failing before launch. We know a game is gonna fail before launch because pattern recognition.
Time and time again, a subset of players and content creators that catch wind of a detail that they don't like in a project, and they make it their personal mission to spend the lead up to the launch bashing the game as much as humanly possible. Sometimes they'll claim victory over sales flops like Concord and Dragon Age the Veilguard, and otherwise they'll pretend like nothing ever happened when a targeted game reviews and sells well, like Assassin's Creed Shadows. The difficulty is if suddenly you end up with anti-fans, they turn from what you want, fans who would go out and spread word of your game and get people interested," said Gator, "but if you get anti-fans, they do the sort of opposite. They are very determined suddenly to see your game fail as a sort of lesson to others who would make games of the same type," right? And that honestly these days, there is that sort of element present in almost all fandoms, but it has always sort of been there for RPGs in particular. Gator went on to explain that he's seen fandom culture exacerbate the problem. More and more fandoms are making the things that they are fans of integral to their identity, and if it's integral to their identity, anything that affects it or insults it insults them, he said. So they are so invested in making it what...
Well, that's how all fandoms have pretty much worked. If you're a fanboy of anything, yeah, this is how it works. This is accurate.
They imagine that, like I said, if they turn into an anti-fan, suddenly their personal investment is seeing that fail, or seeing the developers who made that decision punished. What Gator is describing here is not some sort of sudden cultural phenomenon. It is not new. It is the inevitable byproduct of a decade spent taking your audience for granted. These anti-fans that he's calling out, they didn't start that way. These were regular players, supporters, people that used to show up early, buy in early, give benefit after benefit after benefit of the doubt until they couldn't anymore. What are players supposed to do when the studio behind a franchise that they love no longer makes the thing that they actually love? What happens when a publisher sees loyalty not as something to be rewarded, but as something to be exploited? You get resentment, you get skepticism, and you start to see people that want to see you fail. They want to see your games fail, not because they hate the concept, but because they hate what it represents now. Because watching it succeed would mean validating the worst version of what that series has become. Do you want people to remember the Veilguard or Origins? It's not a hard question. A lot of that resentment is earned. These players were pushed aside in favor of mass appeal, labeled as toxic and outdated for wanting what they used to love in these games, then blamed when those games flopped. They were treated like they were in a...
God, I love this. By the way, looking at this, I love it. Star Wars has always this really stupid thing about it, and it has been since the start of the franchise. Okay, this is not an acolyte thing. Even it's the fact that you have this future tech that can do a lot of things, and when someone gets taken into custody, oh yeah, your futuristic gadgets. Let me just put them right here, right next to you. Okay, can you reach him? Good, good, good. And it's like, okay, what? You're gonna take an enemy combatant in as a hostage, and you're not gonna remove their gear? Sus.
a cave, that their feedback didn't matter, that the real audience was somewhere else waiting to be won over. And when that audience didn't show up, it wasn't their marketing strategy that was getting questioned, it was the players. Again, the industry doesn't want to admit, but a huge part of this so-called anti-fandom is not malicious. It is disillusioned. It is people who have been burned way too many times and have finally stopped hoping for these games. And now, instead of trying to rebuild trust, these companies treat them like they're a liability. They pull back communication. They blame the community. They act like the backlash is the disease when it's clearly the symptom. This entire idea that every fandom is too self-invested, too reactionary, or too fragile, maybe, I could probably see that in some cases, but the part that nobody wants to talk about is how this happened. It wasn't because people started building identities around these games, it's because studios started stripping out the identity from their...
Also, Beast Star Wars have literal robots that function as AI. Do not put in cameras on whole ship that are governed by AI that instantaneously yells alert, alert when something out of the ordinary is happening. Man, what's the point of future technology if you're going to be an idiot about it, honestly?
their games themselves. And when you remove the soul of a series, the only thing that you're going to have left is its name. And when that name doesn't deliver, yeah, people are going to take that personally, because at this point it is personal. I mean, IGN just published a piece on Dragon Age the Veilguard talking to one of their voice actors who had said that she was absolutely devastated by the backlash. Not disappointed, not surprised.
Oh yeah. This one was funny.
Devastated by the backlash. She said that she thought that this was just BioWare being more BioWare, a line in and of itself that tells you everything that you need to know. But what really stands out is how she framed the player's response. She said that a lot of people kind of wanted to see it fail, or wanted to see BioWare fail, either because they are really bad people on the internet. And that is the moment that this conversation dies. Not because...
I don't understand these people that are all... I don't think this person, by the way, did what they did, said what they said in bad faith. I think there's just a surprising amount of people who are kind of... I never understood this principle, but some people are just like that. Oh, if you don't wish the best for everyone, except my political opposition, you're a bad person. They think that everyone should always hope for the best, and things like that. And they don't understand the concept that someone could not even care about you and your position or situation. They find it impossible. I always found those people so insane. Are they people just who never had to deal with adversity in their lives? Did they just grow up rich or whatever? How do you become a voice actor? Okay, that seems to be a very much like, oh yeah, I got a car and on a house when I turned 18 as a gift from my parents, and they are still sending me like 2K a month, so my living is easier now. Like, what the fuck? Because all the people who get into these altruistic workplaces, all of these places, they're pretty much always people who have literally never dealt with any hardships in their lives. And they don't, and their look on life because of it is like, how could you ever think anything poorly of me or my beliefs? And then insane shit proceeds to happen because of this.
Players aren't angry. They definitely are, but this isn't hate, it's rejection. It's players drawing a line and saying, you lost us. And instead of listening, the response is always to label them as bad faith actors and close the door. And IGN, they ran with it. They didn't question the framing, they didn't push back. They turned it into another culture war headline as if the only reason that this game stumbled was because of bigots and trolls. Never mind the poor writing, the brain dead combat, the flat characters outside of maybe two. Never mind the studio's own hand.
To be fair, as much as I understand about Dragon Age Railgod, if you were playing a caster, your combat was pretty okay. If you were playing a melee class, though, mistakes were made.
Handling, never mind the audience that they've spent a decade pushing out. You know, it's actually funny, and it goes to show how lopsided this industry is. But the article actually includes a character tier list, except the lowest rating that you can give a character is a B. You literally
Jesus.
cannot criticize this game, not even hypothetically. This is what happens when companies and media stop asking what went wrong and start asking who to blame. And right now, they're blaming the audience. Again, Dragon Age gained its popularity through its mechanics, its narrative, and its mature themes. But slowly, over the years, they chipped away at everything that was Dragon Age and then turned it into a game with brain-dead action combat.
In other words, they streamlined the experience so it's accessible to everyone. A game for everyone is a game for no one.
And bad writing. Of course the players turned against you. Of course they hate the game and they hate you for it because you used them to try to get to somebody else. They weren't worth anything to you anymore, and you ruined something that they love. How is that a foreign concept? I don't understand how a single one of these companies has not figured this out yet. It is fine for these games to change and evolve, but you have to respect the core audience. They have to be held sacred. You are nothing without these guys. Final Fantasy is another great example of this. I loved Final Fantasy 16. I even enjoyed Final Fantasy 15. But those games struggled to meet whatever their sales targets were because they left the core audience behind, a core audience that still exists. You do not have to.
Now, to be absolutely fair about Final Fantasy, no game has had the same combat system in a row ever. This is true. Okay, even the turn-based combat systems were completely different every game, pretty much. So, Final Fantasy's turn to hack and slash, yeah, that probably sucked for a lot of people. I personally don't care because I don't play Final Fantasy, but it is true that the Final Fantasy combat system was different every single game.
Change genres or gut beloved games just to be able to reach a wider audience. It is just not necessary. Look at Expedition 33. That game is unapologetically inspired by Legend of Dragoon and Final Fantasy VIII. You can see it all over the entire game. Maybe not for some of my younger viewers, but I definitely can. And it tapped into an audience of turn-based enjoyers who then went out and raved about it and led that game to be purchased by a much wider audience. Stop worrying about who you don't have. Worry about who you do have. You know, I was thinking about this the other day, and this might feel like a little bit of a tangent, but I promise that it's not. But, you know, after a while, I wrote it down right here. The core audience isn't there to sustain these games anymore because of the direction that they've gone in. So you've left those guys behind. EA has said it themselves that they took that audience for granted and that they imagined that they'd be there no matter what. But one of the things that
And the best part, by the way, about all of that, it doesn't seem like they're gonna try and fix the situation.
I think that has really put power in our hands is actually through one of their own cost-cutting measures. It's because they got rid of pre-order bonuses. Without pre-order bonuses, you no longer have early investors, people that feel like they are dedicated to buy that game, even if there might be some type of bad buzz around it before the game comes out. We have no reason.
I think people are also a lot more smart now about pre-ordering. I get this comment constantly, by the way, about games that I look at and I'm like, oh, this looks good. This looks fun. Chrono Odyssey, for example, is a good one. Well, any game that I am like, oh, this looks fun. This looks cool. This has a potential. Every single time there's like a person, yeah, but don't pre-order it, which is exactly what we have strived for years at this point. It is to change the opinion of the masses, so pre-ordering no longer is a thing. In the modern day, there is absolutely no reason to pre-order anything. Okay, if something is actually super good, you're gonna hear about it when it gets dropped, and you can pre-order it then if you want. Because again, people on mass when it comes to something like gaming are never gonna be wrong. If the masses say it's good, if you think it's bad, that's probably because it's just not your taste, and it happens. It's normal. No, nothing to be ashamed about, nothing to be wrong about. Okay, I have had also multiple games that were extremely popular, but they're just not for me. It happens. But again, if there are good games, you're gonna hear about this because everyone is gonna rave. Everyone's gonna yell from the top of the hill how great something is. I do it. Everyone does it. And if something's bad, you're not gonna hear about it, or you're gonna hear about how shit it is. That's just the reality of the situation. Pre-ordering is completely worthless. It doesn't matter what kind of stupid bonus you add. Paying $20 or $30 extra for a game so I can play it 3 days early is stupid. And if it's 7 days early, that's just theft at that point.
Reason whatsoever to pre-order games today. And because of that, you are fully, completely reliant on first impressions and day one sales. And if those two things don't hit, game's cooked. Simple as that. We have all of the power now because of that. And I think they're starting to figure that out. EA is finally having to come to terms with the consequences of their own actions of ignoring that
People are figuring out that we ourselves have all the power. Not the companies are figuring out that we have all the power, but we ourselves understand that we can make change if we actually want to. Again, no one is ever going to force any of us to buy any game.
So-called cave-dwelling audience they once believed would be there for them forever, with Veilguard falling flat and a projected 40% drop in net bookings for Apex Legends, a game that has lost more than half of its player base in just 2 years, EA is being forced to make changes. After laying off staff from the Apex team and canceling a planned Titanfall project, they've now shut down an in-development Black Panther game.
I predicted that the Titanfall project is not going to get shut down because I assumed it should have been already pretty deep in production, but turns out it wasn't, so I guess that's that.
It entirely. There are a lot of reasons for why this might have happened. Some of it is likely tied to mounting internal pressure, a string of underperforming titles, and they're just being a little bit more cautious moving forward. Maybe the game wasn't coming together in the background. Maybe the writing leaned in the same direction or the same themes that players have been rejecting from games like Dragon Age: The Veilguard. We've seen this kind of thing happen before. WB's Wonder Woman game ran into similar issues. But more broadly, I think that superhero games just aren't really landing anymore. Outside of Spider-Man, they've either been outright bad, like Marvel's Avengers, or
Spider-Man actually also underperformed. Well, should I say Miles Morales?
Or quietly solid but commercially invisible, like Guardians of the Galaxy. But I think a lot of this is just more tied to people just not really being all that interested in Marvel content anymore. I mean, Disney and Marvel have been making the exact same mistakes that the games industry is making right now, abandoning their core audience for this imagined broader audience of fans that they think that is out there. People call it superhero fatigue, but that's just deflection. If the content was actually good, if it resonated, people would be showing up, but they're not. The newer Marvel shows and movies just aren't connecting, and the brand is failing.
Exactly.
The strategy is basically the exact same. Prioritize everybody except the people that made you popular in the first place, and then pay the price when nobody shows up for it. Marvel movies used to be global events. Now the conversation is about how badly they're going to butcher the next character, show, or movie. Things have gotten so dire for these guys that they're pulling the Robert Downey Jr. ripcord, floating the idea of him coming in as Dr. Doom just to be able to jolt the brand back to life. Now, alongside the cancellation of the Black Panther game and the closure of its studio, EA announced that they're also going to be focusing on fewer franchises moving forward, and for a publisher like EA, that likely means that there are more layoffs coming on down the line, but honestly, I think this might be the right call for these guys to make. I don't think that people understand
Grill power.
just how overextended these major publishers are. Right now, EA has at least 14 non-sports games in active development. That is not counting their annualized releases like Madden or FIFA. We are talking about massive, high-risk projects like Iron Man, Mass Effect 5, the Jedi Survivor sequel, Skate, Need for Speed, a new Battlefield, and more.
Are people interested in Need for Speed at this point? I really don't think they are.
Each one of these is a blockbuster bet. Each one of them is expensive, time consuming, and fighting for internal resources. It's not that EA shouldn't have multiple projects in the works, it's that no publisher should be supporting this many flagship titles at once, especially when most of those franchises have either lost momentum or people just aren't even interested in them at all. The more these guys pile
Again, with the people are not interested in it all argument, I really dislike it. Okay, listen, no one was interested in Helldivers 2. No one was interested in, well, I don't know, Baldur's Gate 3, and no one was interested in Clear Obscure Expedition 33. No one is ever interested in the next big thing when it happens. That's how it is. Now, granted, some of you are, probably, surely, but most people are not. It just happens and it becomes the next big thing. That's how it goes.
on, the less each one of them gets the attention it needs or the talent it needs to be able to see these games fully realized. Now, I've criticized other publishers, Ubisoft in particular, for leaning too hard on a few core franchises, Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Rainbow Six. I've said that they should diversify, experiment.
Far Cry is... Diversification experimentation is them making 12 different games at the same time. So that wasn't good, but now diversification is kind of the thing that you don't want to be good. See, this is the really complex situation about gaming. That's not actually complex. Gaming at the end of the day is never more complex than if it's good, people will play it. That's just it. If it's good, people will play it. Again, Vampire Survivors, you know, the top-down auto shooter game where you just level up and do things. That one, yeah, massively popular. Massively. Insanely popular, in fact. Did anyone expect that? No.
Give their developers some room to make something new, but there's a line between creative variety and overcommitment. There's a difference between building a slate and throwing everything at the wall. That's the trap that EA has walked into. They have greenlit way too many projects, chasing way too many markets, convinced that they can engineer success through volume, and now they're pulling back. Not because they've learned anything, but because, well, the economics of it all caught up to them. Beyond that, I've talked about this in length in some of my videos talking about video game pricing, but there is a bigger structural issue that is looming for publishers like EA, and it has nothing to do with talent or budget. It's just saturation. These companies are spreading themselves way too thin, pumping out massive title year after year, all the while trying to convince us that it is a must-have. No, every single one of them is a must-have, but the truth is, they are flooding a market that is already underwater. Some of these games are going to launch within months of one another. And sure, some of these guys are going to try to say that they're aimed at a different audience, but let's be real, there's going to be some overlap. Players who would have normally bought all of these games, they won't buy any of them because either they can't afford it or they're locked into something else. We are drowning in games right now. And to make matters worse for them, month after month, we keep seeing these unexpected games that break through. When players are faced with this much choice, the decision changes. It's no longer about whether the game is popular anymore, whether they remember that game. It's about whether or not they feel like it's worth their time. And these big budget games, they have lost their edge. These studios have destroyed their reputations, burned through player trust, and now they're betting on brand names that don't even carry any weight. They keep chasing audiences that they don't have, trying to build the most broadly appealing version of every single IP, and the result are these generic, soulless games designed for everyone that end up connecting with no one. When your audience has a library full of options, many cheaper, better, and made by teams that actually care, do you think that they're going to drop $70 or $80 on an Iron Man game?
Yeah, the back catalog situation is also completely insane, obviously. I have a back catalog of I don't know how much long, especially considering I play arena survival games, and that is like vampirism, survival, and things like that. Death Must Die, Soulstone Survivors. Death Must Die and Soulstone Survivors are probably the two better ones. But yeah, it's like those games get constantly updated time to time. I'm literally stacked.
Game, or do you think they're going to go look at Schedule 1 or Expedition 33 or the wave of Eastern games that are coming soon, like Phantom Blade Zero, Tides of Annihilation, or Wu-Chang Fallen Feathers, and take a
Fallen Feathers looks best, not gonna lie.
Chance on something that actually feels fresh? This industry used to ask itself, what will people play? Now it needs to start asking, what is worth playing? Because right now, players have a lot of answers, and most of their games aren't a part of it. I am hoping, and yes, there's very heavy emphasis on hope here, that EA is finally learning from some of their mistakes. They hold some of the most iconic IP in the industry, and they have some of the best talent in the industry, but they have spent the last decade chasing vapor instead of players. If this move to consolidate resources and scale back production is a sign that they are ready to refocus on the actual audiences rather than theoretical ones, then maybe we might see something worth salvaging. Two games stand out as potential turning points for this company: Mass Effect 5 and the next Battlefield. From the outside looking in, both projects seem like they're getting the time, resources, and leadership that they
Mass Effect is so cooked.
actually need. And more importantly, they appear to be aimed at the players who kept those franchises alive. Before Veilguard even released, the director of Mass Effect 5 came out to clarify that their team was not going to follow the same tone or aesthetics. That was clearly a preemptive move meant to create some distance between the two titles before Backlash hit in full force. Kind of makes me feel like they knew what was coming before it even happened. Whether or not that actually translates into something substantial, we're going to have to wait and see, but at least it shows some level of awareness for what their audience does and doesn't want. Battlefield, on the other hand, is going much further. After the disaster that was 2042, which now only hovers at around 6,000 players on Steam and is effectively just a dead game now, EA has completely overhauled its development approach. Instead of
Well, everyone only cares about Call of Duty at this point anyway. Battlefield completely lost the battle there, okay? Puns. Anyway, yeah, that was Legendary Drops. 10 out of 10.